Hey guys, Tim here, back with another Chicago Northwestern Harvard Subdivision in N scale. And yes, you are seeing the corporate inspection train make its way down entirely new track on the new part of the layout that I had built in the last episode. I'm really excited that I've been able to keep the momentum going, and I can't wait to share what I've been able to do here since the last video update. So, in between the video updates, though, I mentioned in the last video, I've got several trips this summer, and we had our first one here this past week. My wife and I went out to Colorado for a few days for a vacation just by ourselves. And you can see here we were in multiple parts. We drove around quite a bit to hit a few different stops. And honestly, one of the nice parts about going to Colorado is the drive itself is pretty awesome because you just have amazing scenery the whole time. So it kind of adds to the value of the stay, but it's just one state over from us, so it's always nice to go and visit. So we spent a few days hiking and visiting national parks and stuff, and it was great. But while that was going on, I definitely had the layout on my mind for a few different reasons. One of which was I had a big order that was on its way while we were on the trip. I did manage to see a few trains, which was kind of cool. I saw my first Montana Rail Link engine. I've never seen one in person before, so that was really neat. And then also caught another manifest on the way back home. You can tell it's on the way back home because the windshield is covered with tons of bugs from driving in the middle of nowhere. But while we were in Colorado, I got notification that my Scale Trains pre-order had shipped, which was several Dash 9 Chicago Northwestern rivet counter locomotives to add to the fleet, and it was going to arrive on the day that we got back from the trip. So I was super excited and motivated to get back home. It's about a 10-hour drive. While we were charging our car at one point, we ran into some locomotives, some F units in a siding in a town in Colorado, which was kind of cool to see. They actually had some more F units, including an old, looked like a Canadian National B unit. I just couldn't get a good shot of those, but that was cool to see as well. So enough rail fanning. Let's get back to the layout. So like I said, this is literally, we got home at like 9 p.m. and I immediately went down and went to work because I wanted to get going. In part as well because I've got two more big trips coming up this summer, and I want to make the most of the time that I am home. But like I said, this is by far the biggest pre-order I've ever done, just because their locomotives are gorgeous. The Dash 9s were the last major purchase the actual Chicago Northwestern made, and so I had to have, they're the most modern, locomotives that don't have to have custom painted. And you can see here, I pre-ordered 5 of them, which just about stretched the limits of what I was able to afford, but I think totally worth it in the end. I am going to have pretty heavily weather these models eventually, just because what the actual Dash 9s looked like by the mid 2010s, they're not fresh. They're not fresh and clean like these models are, but man, they're gorgeous. And I can't wait to finish getting the first level of the layout built so I could run a large manifest with a big consist of these. You can see, all 5 locomotives ready to rock. I immediately wanted to make sure, to get them all out and test them, make sure all the sound and everything worked. So I put them just on a track in the staging yard in the back room, and just let them slowly creep up. And again, just everything about these locomotives, I can't say enough good things about them. They're excellent. The detail is outstanding. And again, I'm a little bummed I'm going to have to weather them, but not really, because I think that they're going to fit the part even more once they fit. Now, the beauty of this is I've got quite a few photos, because there were still what were called the twins. There were 2 unpatched Chicago Northwestern Dash 9s that were still seeing use in the mid 2010s, and obviously there were plenty of railfan photos of those because they were rare and relatively a big deal when they would come across pulling a train. So I've got plenty of pictures of what these should look like, and they'll still be in pretty good shape. But again, after testing all these, it really motivated me even more to keep working on the new area of the layout, because if I can eventually close the gap and completely build around the first level, then I can really run some pretty lengthy trains, and I can consist 3 or 4 of these locomotives and really have a close to prototypical length train that will really highlight what these things can do, both in terms of sound and look and pulling power. But you can see this is the last of the 5 locomotives that I tested. I couldn't really move it far up the siding because I had all the locomotives on the same siding, and you'll see here as I pan back, um, you know, why I am eager to get this done, because I think having a whole line of these pulling, a massive manifest up the line is going to look really awesome and really speak to the benefit of this scale versus the larger scales in terms of, again, fairly prototypical length for modern freight operations. But again, that'll be for other videos because we got to finish the first level of the layout. So let's focus on that for the rest of this video and the progress that I was able to make. First thing I did was I worked on setting up the infrastructure for the shelf brackets for the eventual second level, as well as for getting the backdrop up. I borrowed this method from Ron's Trains and Things, where you lay these plywood sheets not only for the brackets but also for a 1-inch spacer, so that way your backdrop goes in front of the shelf brackets. And you can see I didn't build any additional benchwork because still need to get the rest of that wall done. You'll notice there's a gap in where those plywood pieces are over here in the corner, but that's because I'm gonna have to cut holes over here to replicate, the entrance and exit for the second level when we eventually build that. So that's why there's kind of a weird missing gap in the pattern compared to the rest of what I've been able to build so far. And then here's the 1-inch spacers installed, and again, that's just to make sure that when I go to mount the backdrop, the shelving brackets are behind it. So that way it minimizes the disruption from the scenery compared to if I'd put it, otherwise. So here's the brackets up. And I'll actually be working on the second level sooner rather than later. Not the actual second level, but this is also, used to help with the lighting for the first level, which I'll want to be able to work on. So I was able to get the backdrop boards installed pretty quickly. I'm really happy with that curve there in that corner for the backdrop. And there's that hard angle right there. I'm going to use a building structure and a few other tricks to help mask that. There really wasn't a better way to handle that. This is, by the way, I was able to get all this done before we left for the trip. So then one of the first things I did after unboxing all those Scale Trains locomotives was just to clean up. I had obviously a lot of dust from getting everything drilled in and installed. So I got the shop vac out and made sure to clean up. And I actually had to get the Dremel out, and I had a little bit of overhang on one of the backdrop pieces there, and that's why there's so much dust and debris in that corner. But again, I really wanted just to make sure that everything was nice and clean. And it's actually one of the main reasons I wanted to get the backdrop up before doing track work. Was on the previous section of the layout, I had had some real nasty dust and debris issues that I didn't properly account for, and it made for some extra cleanup that I really didn't want to have to do. I did then go through and do the first level. I still need to do one more level, especially on the corner, of just some joint compound to help make sure everything is flush and even for when I eventually get the backdrop installed. And then I immediately went to work, and I kind of did the staggered approach where I would lay down some road bed, and then a little while back I would then start laying the sections of flex track. So you had this staggered addition of track, road bed, additional tracks, because this is a triple tracked mainline, which it'll visually look great when it's all done, but obviously triple tracked mainline means triple the stuff you have to do to get the mainline, installed on the layout. So you can see I'm adding, around this corner, and as this front track pops out, you can see I laid the second track through the tunnel entrance to go back into the back room, to eventually those will lead to the helix. And again, I laid more road bed down, and then I started to get the second track laid around that initial kind of bend that you see there. And I'm mainly just using push pins. It's pretty sufficient with the acrylic caulk that I'm using. Just has a little bit of a longer dry time, which is fine. And you can see I'm really happy with how this curve has turned out. It's about a 25-inch radius curve on the farthest one. You can see I'm getting to the point where I'm going to have to lay a switch. There's a siding here for local operations that you'll see in a minute when I show you the layout plan. But you can see I've got the second track coming along pretty well, and now I have the third track down. So I really liked this staggered approach because it gave me the time and space to really make sure the distance between the tracks was consistent, that it really, everything lined up and looked smooth. And so, again, took a little more time, but I was really happy with how it was turning out. And you can see, now I've got the second track completely curved around. The third one is almost there, and that was kind of the pausing point I was hoping to get to at this point, just because once it gets up to that switch, that's going to be another spot where I add the isolation, the plastic clear isolated rail joiners, because I am trying to keep different sections isolated, so eventually I can do block detection and other pieces. I figure if I do those steps now, it'll make those pieces in the long run later. But you can see how this is turning out. And again, I'm really happy with how the curves are looking. You can see I'm starting to, even though the stopping point for the track is where the switch is going to go, I'm still trying to lay the roadbed ahead of the track so that way I can keep going. And you can see with these curves, I actually went, and you'll see in a minute, this is actually somewhat of a departure from my original track plan, because originally I was really hugging that corner, and the curves were tighter. I had a long straight section, and I realized that really wasn't very visually appealing. And with shorter radius, it doesn't look good with some of the longer cars, especially like the auto racks that I want to run. So you can see it's going to form a really nice S curve. So the track that's laid, again, it's about 25-inch radius, where you can see I'm starting to lay the roadbed. That's a 28-inch radius curve. And again, here's the original plan. You can see the curve was much tighter. It hugged that interior corner there. And so I think it looks much more bland here. Corner, 3-foot straight section, another corner. By expanding the radius and making sure that there's, a curve directly flowing into the other curve, I think it's gonna look a lot better. I think when the scenery's done, it's gonna photograph a lot better. I think it's gonna long prototypical trains are gonna look good on this. And so I just think I'm happy with that audible that I called. I just think it fits the space better than what I originally drafted up. This is as far as I got, by the way. Was getting ready to lay the straight section along the back wall. You can see I'm laying more of the roadbed down. I'm starting to lay down the roadbed for where the siding is going to break off. But otherwise, this is about 12 feet or so. So the plan is I'm going to sculpt that up so that way there's a slope up. But I do want to have some kind of undulating hills on the front side, in part because it'll be a nice contrast from over here where it's real flat. And it's real flat because this is a town. It's all going to be buildings and roads. There's not really space for hills. But over here, that's not necessarily the case. And I want to change it up a little bit. So in the foreground, there will be, again, some slight rolling hills coming up, especially on the curve. I think that's a good spot to help break it up, change up the view a little bit. On this corner, there will be tall, like condominiums, office buildings, and then it'll transition into pretty heavily forested area, which is what actually happens on the approach to Palatine. The plan, we have the highway overpass as a view block, but the plan right here, because right here, obviously, in the real world, these sets of tracks aren't anywhere near each other, right? This is going into Arlington Heights. This is going into Palatine. So the plan is I'm going to build right here a structure. If you look at it dead on, it's going to look really narrow, but looking at it from either perspective of the tracks, it's just going to look like a cool view block, but it's going to fit the perspective of what you're looking at, whether you're looking at it from Arlington Heights or from Palatine. It just looks like a structure you would find on the line. But it helps discern the fact that these are two different scenes. They just happen to be close to each other because, physically in the room, you got to get to the back room. And I'm doing that because over here, I'll do a rail crossing right here. And if you look at the actual, real part of the line, it's a bunch of houses. It's backing up to a neighborhood. And there's actually some Wathers kits that look really close to the houses that are built here. So I'm just going to have them rear facing before transitioning to the industrial area where the local operation will be. So, but anyway, the final piece that I did in the last week or so is I drilled the holes. I laid down the wiring for this section. And again, this section, not all of the new track is wired because, again, I have isolated them into different areas. But, I got the first set of wires, soldered and ready to go. and then obviously quickly went through and wired up on the backside. I love these are really cheap terminals that you can just get on Amazon. They've really worked really well, and handled how I need them to. So I got them screwed in underneath, and I've installed all the feeders over there to make everything good to go. And then I just quickly temporarily removed the DCC unit from where it normally is. I uninstalled the actual bus line and programming track, and just ran just temporary lines from those terminal strips down to the because again, this is not yet connected to the other part of the layout that I've built, because until the wall is finished, I can't fully join it yet, which hopefully we'll get that finished here this week. But you can see here, I'm testing it. You can see I actually initially had a problem. It's completely dead on the middle track, and then on the interior and exterior tracks, it ran just fine. I realized I just hadn't fully secured the black feeder wire for the middle track, and I was able to get that fixed. But you can see, just running these through, and again, I've put the DCC unit back. You can see here now I'm testing with one of the scale trains units, to make sure that it's running sound equipped units just fine. So that's what I'm playing with here. But the immediate priority is to finish both the bench work and the track for the first level. So basically, what you're seeing me do here, I want to continue with the rest of the bench work that I've built, and then by that point, the wall will be done, which will allow me to build the remaining bench work. Because once I get this first level complete, then again, I can really enjoy running some trains through significant footage before looking at the next big step, which will be actually laying the plywood for the second level. Again, not for the second level, but because I want to figure out, the lighting, make sure the lighting looks good, and then really move on to actually signaling for the first level as well. But you can see here, after I did just a quick adjustment, I was able to check and make sure that yes, the middle track was just fine. Again, it just took one quick adjustment because I realized I hadn't properly installed one of the feeders into the terminal strips like I had initially thought, and that was it. So again, now that the DCC unit is back where it normally goes, I couldn't do this anymore. I just did it quickly because I wanted to test my wiring, and it was an exciting, bit to actually have this much done within the amount of time that I had set out to work on it. So, and then of course, I had to test it, like I said, with a sound equipped unit. I really loved how these sound and how they're looking. Hopefully in the next video, you'll see a consist of these pulling, an intermodal train or an auto rack train, something large, so you can really see why I'm as excited as I am about having these units on the layout. But again, that's kind of the the immediate priority is just going to be to keep this momentum going. In about 10 days, I'll be heading out to my next trip, and that's a long trip. It's a couple of weeks, so I'm hoping I can put together one more video update for you all. And I would really love to get up to the entrance into the room. That'll take a little bit longer to complete, just because that's a drop gate that I need to install. But if I can get to that point, I'll be really satisfied. So I'll leave you with that. I'm really happy with the progress that we made, and I'm really appreciative of everybody's support. The last video I put out got a ton of views, ton of likes, ton of comments. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. I am, again, really excited to keep the momentum going. So if you haven't yet, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps grow it. And I'll be back soon with another update before my next trip. Thanks, everyone.